Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens, Screenwriting Step by Step, Volume 21. I'd like to apologize. My camera, which I guess you can see here, kind of, my camera just announced that the battery is exhausted. So I'm using my computer's camera. It sucks relative to what you're used to, and I apologize. I will get a new battery for that camera. But for the moment, I did not want to miss a stream because I got some cool stuff going on and I wanted to get into it. So without further ado, let us get into the story because I came up with some good stuff here. What I did was I started to walk through the outline. Just walk through, meaning read through, take myself step by step through the outline, imagining it scene to scene, or just understanding what the process was, the progress was. And I got to strongly advise doing this. You do it in just going over and over it, thinking through it, just even cleaning up the language, trying to get yourself there. What this is you go over it and over it and over it. That is a lot of the process of writing. You write something, then you revise it, then you revise it, then you revise it. You write, you revise, you write, you revise. You go over it and over it and over it. I do not actually know a better way to write than simply going through it, walking through it, starting at the beginning and moving through, or starting at the chapter you're at, and taking each step of each scene and saying, how does this work? So in this case, I was walking through it. I was looking at these scenes, and the beginning is starting to come together. But then I hit the snag that when Madeline realizes that her ex has this evidence that George had the secret new DNA evidence that I talked about in an earlier episode that we put into the story. Why doesn't she bring it to the police? It just kept on bugging me. I had made notes about it. I'd asked it here on the live stream. And what I kept running into was, well, it could be that the police don't take it seriously. It could be that she doesn't trust the police for any reason. I wasn't coming up with anything very convincing. And then it occurred to me, maybe there is no evidence. The reason that we needed the evidence was because we needed something to provoke the killer to be after them. He had to be trying to stop them. But I realized something. I had mentioned earlier, the fact that he contacts them is evidence. And so therefore, there doesn't have to be real evidence. And in fact, it's sort of better for the character of George, the whacked out crazy, that he simply decided to say he had evidence in order to provoke the killer. He's like, I can't catch this guy. We have no evidence. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say I have a way to get to him, and I'm going to make him mad. And I'm going to make him, the famous, make him make a mistake. And that is what George was doing, not realizing that he actually provoked Zach to try and hungrily steal the evidence and murder him. So what that means is that when the killer contacts them, he can say to them, I didn't kill George, and they can say, but he'll say, I didn't kill George, but you have to stop this hunt that George was on. And they can say, don't worry, George was full of it. He didn't actually have any evidence. And they hang up. And then all of a sudden, the killer realizes, oh crap, I just gave them evidence. Now I have to come after them. And I think that that's the end of the pilot. I had originally thought the end of the pilot was simply he starts to threaten them. And then I realized that this is much more character-based. It's much more funny, and it's much more part of the sort of vision I'm working on here, which is that the characters, the mistakes that people make, I think I call it yes, this story is a cascade of fumbles. That's how I'm looking at it. This story is a cascade of fumbles. George is lying. George makes a mistake. The killer calls them. He's making a mistake. Zach made a mistake by killing. Everybody's getting into this mess in which they all have to end up trying to kill each other because they're fumbling. They're making mistakes. And that struck me as just a major overview note, a major style note. Are all making mistakes based in their needs that force them into conflict. The characters are all making mistakes based in their needs that force them into conflict. That just strikes me as a way to understand the story. And it's always good to have a way to understand the story. Hello, Wolf Powers. How are you? Good to have a regular back watching. You missed the part where I apologized. My camera battery has died, so I'm using my the webcam on my computer, which is not that great. So anyway, what I've got here is, when I figured this out, I went through I was going through the outline step by step. This is something I just can't recommend enough. Just walk through it until you know it. Every time, it's like rehearsing. It's like rehearsing a pitch or a presentation, or finding a way to tell the story to yourself over and over again until it's second nature, till you know what comes next, because then you'll be able to write freely. And then you'll also be able to notice what's needed and what's not. So the next thing that came to me was that, therefore, we need to have Madeline discover that George was planning to lure the killer. And I was thinking, well, why would she do that? And I realized one of the other things that happened was Zach would show up. Earlier in the story, I show that when Norman interferes with the plan to steal the files, everyone reacts to that online, in the online group. They're calling each other and saying, wait a second, Norman showed up and messed up the plan. So Zach heads for the house, right? I had written that a while ago. Well, if he heads for the house, he's got to show up at the house. So I added that scene, and that said to me, okay, so now, once again, you're walking through it. We had Zach have a plan to rob her, and Norman goes to interfere, and then Norman ends up spending the night, and they make love, and then they're getting to know each other after that. And in that weird, awkward day, Zach shows up. And he's like, hey, what are you guys doing? I wanted to get this case solved, and you're coming together as a couple, which is a misunderstanding of where they are. So once again, everybody's misunderstanding each other. And that, I liked that. And I also thought, if Zach shows up and he's like, I want those files, and she's like, fine, look at the files. I don't care. So Zach could be the one who discovers that George actually had no evidence. So I haven't worked out the details of that, but it just makes sense. Zach. Madeline lets Zach look at the files. So there's another event. Every time you go through the story, you get to know it better. And every time you get to know it better, you begin to look at it through the character's point of view and say, well, I would, like Zach, he left, he's on his way, he would show up. So the thing that I've run into here is when the killer shows up and contacts Madeline, my original thought was he's a mysterious, ominous presence. He's an unseen threat. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt, you know what? We need to see him. We need to meet him. He's a character. His mistakes are equally central to the story as the other characters. He can't be an off-screen presence. I was thinking of not introducing him for a while, but now I realized we need to meet him right during this first episode, which I actually think is going to be a really fun way to handle laying out the concept of why these people come into conflict. He calls them. He's a mysterious voice, perhaps, or maybe we even intercut him then, but he says, lay off, don't come after me, I didn't kill this guy, but if you know what's smart, you'll stop. And they say, don't worry, we don't have any evidence. They hang up, everyone thinks, oh, well, that was close, we almost ended up in a fight with a killer. And then we have to see him realizing, oh crap, now I have given them evidence. They know that I'm alive, they know that I'm out here, they know that I'm et cetera, et cetera. And so we need to see him there. So that is where I got. And the thing is, this all came very quickly. It all came today. I did a little session of working on this earlier today. But then actually a lot of this came in the last half hour when I was setting up to do the live stream at around 2 o'clock, from 2 to 2:30. So just a half an hour, I was going through my notes and just trying to clean them up. And things started to click. And that's sort of what I wanted to tell you about. When you go over things and over them, and you give this time, then all of a sudden it just happens very fast. When you get it fast. That's the thing that you should know. So you want to have a system in place to write it down when you get it. You want to have an outline that you can put scenes into. You want to have a way to capture your good work when it happens, because you never know when it will happen. The only way that you can make it happen is by laying out this place for it. And then, as I said, just go over it and over it and over it. And every time you go over it, new pieces come to you out of nowhere, because that's the truth of creativity. The really magical part, where you think of stuff, where you imagine it, you don't know where it comes from, and you don't know when it will happen. So that is the first step of today's little lesson. And it leads me to another question, which is, when I decided to put all this stuff into the pilot, I was, bringing the killer in at the beginning, finding out that George didn't have it. There's an awful lot of information now in the pilot. And that comes to a sort of philosophical question about TV, which is, especially since streaming began, one concept of TV is to think of it, of the story as like, this is a 6-hour, 13-hour unit, in which case you can start very slow. Like your first act might be 3 hours long. And that's one way of looking at it. A lot of shows will say, we're gonna hook you in a little bit, but we're really gonna start a big surprise like 3 or 4 episodes in. The other philosophy is jam it all in right away. I remember there's a quote from Sean Ryan, who did the show The Shield, saying, I don't want to say, in 6 episodes, this is going to be cool. I want it to be cool every minute of every episode. Bam, bam, bam. In this particular case, I'm going to fall towards that style. And the reason I'm going to do it, I'm going to be jamming in as much as possible into this pilot, because I'm trying to teach you stuff, and I'm only going to be writing this pilot here for you. And so therefore, there is no later episode, and I can't afford to say, oh, it'll be cool when that happens. It's not going to happen. So I want to get as much in as I can. So that's the reason I'm making this creative choice. Everybody has to make every creative choice for their own reasons, deciding what style you want to be in, what type of thing you've loved that you're trying to imitate. So that is our lessons for the day about telling this story, the UPKP, the Untitled Podcaster Killer Project. But now I want to take a second to do an Ask Me Almost Anything, because I got an interesting comment question from Jessie J, who was saying, how do you plan for a 30-minute show versus an hour? Does it matter, or do you just try and condense it as much as possible? So far, it's been stringing together scenes that you've brainstormed, and I think that Jessie meant here in this series of videos, I've been just throwing stuff down and then working with that, but I haven't talked about a big structure yet. Although right now, today, the past couple of episodes, I have been trying to start to shape the pile of stuff that I've created. But the main question that is coming up here from Jessie is there a difference between planning a 30-minute pilot versus a 1-hour pilot? And I thought that was an interesting and valuable question that a lot of you might have. In the history of television, it is long history since 1947, the concept of a half hour versus an hour has usually been comedy versus drama. For much of TV history, half hour was comedy and 1 hour was drama. That has all gone to hell. There are no more rules like that anymore. There are half-hour dramas, there are hour-long comedies, there are comedies that are dramatic, and there are dramatic shows that have a lot of weird comedy. Everything's up for grab right now. We're at a period of incredible creative chaos, which is, I think, super cool. But the difference so in that sense, when people used to talk about half hours, they meant comedies, sitcoms, basically. And when they talked about hour-long, they were talking about dramas. That's no longer true, and so that difference, definitely, you can sort out by size anything you like. But the other difference between 30 minutes and 60 minutes is obviously you got twice as many minutes, so your structure is going to be different. And the answer to that is there is no process difference. It's not like you think differently about 30 minutes or 60 minutes. You just have a different scale to work on, just like there's a difference in working in an hour-long versus a 2-hour movie-shaped thing, or even a 2-hour episode. It just doesn't matter. What matters is in the time you've got, you need to accomplish certain things, and that's what you think about. What do I have to accomplish in this limited time? In 30 minutes, you're only going to get half as many scenes. There's only so much room. So you have to say, how am I going to get a beginning, middle, and end to this section? How am I going to introduce these characters? How am I going to introduce these ideas? What is going to happen? What's going to be the set piece? Since everything needs set pieces. Set pieces are the moments when you get really intensely into whatever it is that people come to for the show, like the genre. If it's a horror, there's going to be a set piece of gore and fear. If it's a comedy, there will be a set piece when things get particularly wacky. Whatever the style of the piece is about, that's where your set pieces are the most intense sections, little scenes and sequences that get most intense. And you always want to have a couple of those. Greetings to Adam. Glad you are here. And so the answer to, is there a difference between 30 minutes and 60 minutes? Not in terms of process. Obviously, in terms of what you can fit in, yes. But in terms of how you do it, no. 30 minutes is just, this is how much room you've got. If you think of it as index cards or items on your outline here, which is also visible as a scene list where you just have the basic scenes, the ideas that you're going to have to think of as the building blocks of your story. Those are the same if you have however many are in, a 30-minute show, let's say 20 or so, and then twice as many for a 60-minute show. That's the main difference. There really isn't a conceptual difference between a half hour and an hour, as long as you forget the classic half hour is comedy thing, because that's over. Like I would say, is Fleabag a comedy? Is Fleabag a drama? Yes. Yes to both. And brilliantly done in both cases. So that is basically what I had to cover today. I am happy to take a question. If anyone has a question, ask me anything. Ask me why the camera is so bad. Go ahead. The answer is my regular camera battery died as I started the episode, and therefore I have switched to my computer webcam, which is not as good. So I'm not overly eager to record a whole ton of material with this camera, but for the moment, anybody got any questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, have yourself a fabulous weekend. I look forward to seeing you next week when we will do more.